Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Connie Baxter Marlow, and this is Andrew Cameron Bailey. And we are speaking today on Mystical Man, Mystical Mountain, Thoreau, Ktaadn, and the Transformation of Consciousness. So it's a review of Thoreau and his connection with the mystical aspects of reality. Ktaadn's connection to the mystical aspects of reality and how that informed Thoreau's life, and he changed the world as a result, and how he foresaw the coming of what we're calling humanity 2.0, a new human. And so that's the threads that this talk will explore. And we've written a book, The Trust Frequency, 10 Assumptions for a New Paradigm, in which we bring Thoreau, indigenous cosmology, and quantum science together to give tools for how to access this, what we're calling this frequency. And we'll show how Thoreau actually saw that as well, that there are different frequencies where there are different laws. And the indigenous peoples of the world, which you'll experience in this talk as well, have access to this frequency. And so we're bringing in clips from our film series, The American Evolution, Voices of America, with Brad Dean, a Thoreau scholar, and who's passed now, so we're very lucky to have him on film. And Arnie Neptune, a Penobscot elder who is also passed and who was a good friend of ours, and Richard Smith as Henry David Thoreau. And Richard's alive and well and with us, not here today, but he's with us. And so we'll have various clips from this film series that was shot back in 2002 to illustrate our points, and lots of quotes from Thoreau. And just a little background for me, I had questioned as a young person what had humanity out of balance. Why aren't we acting from our hearts that I witnessed through Florence Nightingale? I just had sort of an epiphany. You know, we're such capable of such love. Why aren't we coming from that place? And what I got was that there are missing pieces of the paradigm. There's missing information. Our logical mind is operating from misinformation. And my life became an unfolding of bringing these pieces, this missing information to me. I looked in Europe, I looked all around at the Western mind and couldn't find anything different from how I'd been raised. And in 1976, I came across a book of Native American poetry in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I just saw it, that these people have clues to those missing pieces of the paradigm, that they experience a reality that's so far outside of the reality that we experience in the scientific paradigm, that that they have important information for us. And then Native people started coming into my life, visionary elders started coming into my life, and I started getting these clues from these Native people. And I was in Concord one day visiting my cousin, Julia French, who's here in the audience, and I was at the bookstore and at Walden Pond, and I saw, "Why make such a great ado over the Greek and Roman and neglect the Indian?" a quote from Thoreau. And I saw that Thoreau saw the importance of the Native American. So that started my whole journey with Thoreau. And I discovered, I asked the head of the bookstore then, must have probably been John at the time, "What's this all about?" And he said, "Oh, yes, well, we have a scholar who is transcribing Thoreau's Indian notebooks." And I'm like, "Whoa, this is cool." And he said, "Would you like to meet him?" And it was Brad Dean. And so from there, this whole thing has evolved. And so that's that's sort of that story. And my family, the Baxters of Maine, who gave Mount Ktaadn to the people of Maine, lived by a different way of being. They gave away the family fortune. They gave it to the people of Maine and championed animals, water, women, and the earth in office as politicians. So I was led to say, what were they living by, that they weren't hoarding their money and saving their money and keeping it for future generations. And in the Indigenous way, there's the giveaway. You give it away because there's more where that came from. So anyway, that's my story. And Andrew, I wanted to give just a little background on your story.
So it's a pleasure and a privilege and an honor to be back here at the 74th, I believe, Thoreau Society annual gathering. You probably don't recognize me from last time because I was wearing a fake glue-on mustache because I was playing Einstein. And what we've done the last 3 or 4 times has been more of a theatrical presentation. Thoreau and the Indians, and a couple of pieces on Thoreau, the parallels between Henry David Thoreau and Albert Einstein, whose thinking, although they did not influence each other and of course did not know each other, having lived 150 or so years apart, the extraordinary parallels between those two amazing, influential humans. What we're talking about today is specifically Thoreau and how he perhaps is a precursor, a way shower to another way of being, to perhaps a higher reality, a higher form of human consciousness. Because if we look around the world today, we'll see many of the same problems Thoreau was protesting against in his time. Exactly the same issues, possibly expanded. Many of us have worked hard in the interim to change things, and in some ways we have succeeded, and in some ways it seems like we have not succeeded. So we're sort of hitting the reset button, going back to Thoreau's original inspiration, which also had to do with the mystical mountain of Ktaadn. So my background, I grew up in South Africa. I started out as a scientist. I'm the science guy. Connie's the mystic, and I'm the sort of mystical, mysterious science guy. I started out as a chemist, as a college teacher in chemistry, mostly organic chemistry, not physics. So there's a difference there, and physics is something I caught up with later. But a part of today's presentation has to do with physics, has to do with something that Thoreau knew nothing about because he lived those many decades before Einstein. Einstein started something new. We know of it today as quantum mechanics or quantum science, quantum physics. It has changed the scientific paradigm. Back in Thoreau's day, it was Newton, Descartes, and brand new Darwin. So the reality then, the scientific reality, was very material, very reductionist, and very lacking in spirit. And what's interesting is that through Einstein and through what has unfolded since the beginning of last century, roughly, let's say in the last 110 years, there's been a huge expansion of what we can understand about the nature of the universe from science, which is different. It's not a bunch of billiard balls bouncing around in space and resulting in us. Didn't quite work like that. So we'll be getting deeper into that as we proceed here. My first discovery, perhaps this is relevant, then I'll hand it back over to Connie, is that, as Thoreau said, of course, the universe is wider than our view of it. Even now, we can only see this tiny little fragment looking through the Hubble Space Telescope or whatever instruments we've developed. We can observe and perceive a tiny proportion of the universe. The universe appears to be infinite. If one were to actually use one's rational mind, you would say the universe goes on forever and ever and ever, and there's no end to it. How do you, from the perspective of this planet and this species, really come to understand it? Thoreau was one of those who somehow moved beyond, penetrated beyond the limitations of his upbringing his education, and his time through, significantly, his interaction with the Native Americans, who saw in a different way into a different reality. And another part of what we will be presenting is that the indigenous peoples of the world, not just the Native Americans, seem to have always understood the universe in ways that quantum science is perhaps finally catching up with. So I think you'll find this talk interesting from that perspective. I was an anthropology student in South Africa. I was teaching science and chemistry, but I kept on studying. I was just a sort of degree junkie. I kept on wanting to know and learn more and more and more. I didn't specialize, you know, the PhD, which the great Lakota elders said stood for post-hole digger. You dig a hole in the ground, you put your feet in it, you become a real expert on this little focused thing. I wasn't like that. I have a broad base to my pyramid, and I'm still building the rest of it. I discovered in a course on comparative religion, the worldview of the Australian Aborigines, who, as many of you may know, have a very, very different way of understanding reality. It was very difficult for the English, when they first got to Australia, to understand what on earth they were talking about. Their dream time, the interconnectedness, creation is now, it's still unfolding. Science is now realizing that that is a whole lot closer than the little boxes that we Europeans had assembled up to that time. And we're in this amazing moment right now where it's all just expanding like a flower blossoming into a new reality. And Thoreau is supporting us in that venture.
As is Ktaadn. Ktaadn, the mystical mountain. Most people who go on Ktaadn have an experience. Many people say they see God. Okay? We're going to show you a clip and a quote from Thoreau's Ktaadn, where the contact passage, where he expresses his epiphany, his experience on Ktaadn. I might ask you folks here in the audience, how many of you have climbed Ktaadn? One.
No, more
two.
than one, yeah.
And this is my daughter, Allison Baxter Marlow, who is here in the audience, thankfully.
You can probably tell us about some mystical experiences up on that mountain.
Possibly. Anyway, here we go with Thoreau and the contact passage. So, all right. What we're going to do tonight is ponder. Hold on. The nature of a
there we go.
And the mystical nature of Henry Thoreau and the mystical nature of the Native American Indian.
Mystical, of or stemming from direct communion with ultimate reality or God, of or having a spiritual reality or import not apparent to the intelligence or senses.
Thoreau famously stayed at Walden Pond for 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days between 1845 and 1847. About halfway during Thoreau's stay at the pond, he went to the Maine Woods, his first trip to the Maine Woods, and climbed Mount Ktaadn, the highest peak in the state of Maine. And it's interesting to see what he has to say. He actually has quite a long passage about it. But what I'd like to do is just read what I regard as the most critical component of this long passage. Among Thoreau scholars, it's fairly well known as the contact passage, and you'll see why in a moment. I stand in awe of my body, he writes. This matter to which I am bound has become so strange to me. I fear not spirits, ghosts, of which I am one, that my body might, but I fear bodies. I tremble to meet them. What is this Titan that has possession of me? Talk of mysteries, think of our life and nature, daily to be shown matter, to come in contact with it. Rock, trees, wind on our cheeks, the solid earth, the actual world, the common sense. Contact, who are we? Where are we?
Said it.
This is kind of, I think for Thoreau, this is kind of a seminal experience, this an experience that you have out in the world that gets you down to some of the most foundational, fundamental questions that even involve who you are, questions of identity, epistemology. I mean, again, some of the most philosophically basic questions.
The spirit of the mountain is always there, and it draws people there. It draws people that comes there who are non-Indians, and they don't know the reason why they are drawn there. But they are drawn there because of the spirit of the mountain.
Okay, so here's Ktaadn having its influence on Henry David Thoreau. And we'd like to show also that Thoreau had more of a relationship, not just with Ktaadn, but with nature, with the forest, with the trees. And this is a quote from him. "It is the living spirit of the tree I love most. It is as immortal as I am, and perchance will go to as high a heaven, there to tower over me still." So we're just going to roll through this part of sharing this mystical connection to the universe. Here's another clip that shows the Wabanaki connection to Ktaadn.
The Spirit of Katahdin.
We're here at Mount Ktaadn in north central Maine at Baxter State Park. It's revered by the Wabanaki Indians as a sacred place. It's been revered by them throughout the millennia because they see the spirits here. They speak with the spirits here. It is a place where the Creator and the spirits reside and speak to those who are open and willing to listen.
Well, yes, anytime you go there, the spiritual communication is always there. It never goes away. We have legends that tells us how the mountain was formed. We have legends telling us how the mountain was, how sacred it is, who the spirits are in the mountain. One of them is the story of the legend of Ktaadn itself. The name Ktaadn was at one time one of our chiefs of one of the tribes.
Gluskabe was sent by the Creator to the people of the eastern part of Turtle Island, the continent of the Americas, to teach all living plants, animals, birds, fish, insects, and especially men and women, how to live in harmony with each other. A young orphan boy came to live amongst the people. His name was Ktaadn. He was taught by Gluskabe how to catch fish, hunt deer, how to skin and prepare them for eating, and how to make his clothes. He was taught the language of the trees, the wind, and the animals of the forest. Everyone in the tribe loved Ktaadn for his kind, gentle ways. He was taught that all living things had a purpose for being on earth. Ktaadn became a very good leader of the tribe and an astute pupil of Gluskabe. The spirit of Ktaadn lives within the massive mountain we call Ktaadn in his honor. It is in this way that Ktaadn is thought to embody the great teachings of the Creator. The sacred mountain is an inspiration to all who believe Ktaadn to be a spirit who will lead mankind to his highest potential by bringing wisdom to all who open their hearts and minds to listening and learning. Arnie Neptune, Penobscot Elder.
So the spirits are there, and they call to all people. They call to all people, whoever they are, especially poets, people that takes pictures, and just people that receive that message, and they come and climb the mountain, and they receive that spirit. They're able to talk to the spirit. Most of them don't know why they called there. They're just called, and they respond, and they come.
But the rocks speak, the trees speak. Everything speaks. It has spirit. It's alive.
And a lot of them don't know, but for me and our people, we know it's the spirit of Ktaadn. The Wabanaki all goes to the mountain and does ceremony and prays on the mountain, prays with the mountain, to the mountain, and offers the tobacco and the sage and all the prayers. And when we pray, all of us, when the Indians, we pray, we don't pray just for our own people, we pray for all people of the earth, because we are the keepers of the earth. So we have to pray for and honor all people and all all living things of the earth, all the way around the globe.
So, Thoreau, as here's another quote from Thoreau showing his connection to this spirit. I believed that the woods were not tenantless, but chock full of honest spirits, as good as myself, any day. Not an empty chamber in which chemistry was left to work alone, but an inhabited house, and for a few moments I enjoyed fellowship with them. So we'll go on and show other people's connection to Ktaadn.
Ktaadn also speaks to many who come here. People feel that it slopes. Speak to them that it's rocks, that the trees here, that the spirits come and speak through the clouds and through the weather and through the winds.
I feel Ktaadn is alive in the sense that it has spirit. You can feel its spirit on the trails that you walk, the surrounding terrain of its land. In the wind, you can hear it, hear the voices in the wind of Ktaadn.
But while they're in the wilderness, they have this kind of a foundational experience, and they're able to see through the appearance of things to the reality and bring that spiritual truth back into the human community and tell people in that community what's real as opposed to what appears to be.
If one just feels and listens to what is happening around you, you become one with the mountain in the sense that you're part of a living entity.
Spirituality, I think, is always with you. There's always a spirit guide with you. They're always there at home, whether you're at work, whether, you certainly don't have to be in a certain setting to feel different things, but it's accentuated 100% up here. You're much more open to what can come in, and you're able to let the things in instead of being closed off in another setting. The spirituality up here is just, it's indescribable.
The mountain speaks to each one of us according to our own inner beliefs, whether they're religious or naturalists or whatever they are.
When you come to Ktaadn, you feel as though you have these giant arms that are just wrapped around you, and they engulf you with a kind of love and spirituality that you just don't feel anywhere else.
There's like a heartbeat. There's a heartbeat. There's a connection there, a real connection on a spiritual sense.
I'm drawn here largely because, as Jeff said, it's spiritually invigorating, and I reconnect with myself as well as, I guess, what I would feel is nature, and I need that annually. I need that reassertion of myself, and it's given to me here, and I treasure it.
It has its own poetic enchantment, but you have to sense it and be able to feel that, become one with the mountain, one with nature, more or less. But nature is all around us, so the mountains speak for itself. There were spirits lived there according to their beliefs, and I believe that today. That you can hear it in the voice of the wind, crying across Knife's Edge, blowing up above the mountain. You can hear it in the crashing of the thunder. You can see it in the clouds, where the clouds come over Ktaadn and engulfs it like a blanket. It holds it. There's something to that that's special than any other place around. If you stop and listen to the sounds that the mountain is, and what the vibration of the mountain, what it's giving off.
By day, man stands spellbound in the solitude where man himself is an atom at the base of one of nature's noblest creations. By night, he is inspired by the majesty of the moon as it rises and moves westward in a stately curve over the serrated peaks, which throw themselves up into the deep blue of the night as though to join the company of the stars. Percival Proctor Baxter.
So now we're going to jump way out west to Arizona for a little message that I think Thoreau could well have resonated to. It's from the Hopi, and they said this a long time ago. I'm not sure when exactly this was recorded or written down, but the prophecy is this: when birds fall from the sky and the animals are dying, a new tribe of people shall come unto the earth from many colors, classes, and creeds, who by their actions and deeds shall make the earth green again. They will be known as the warriors of the rainbow. So folks, I hope you don't mind, but that's us.
That's all of us.
All of us.
And,
right.
And Thoreau foresaw a new kind of human. And that's what we're going to be talking about from here on out, is this possible human, this as I mentioned, humanity 2.0. And Thoreau modeled this in his life. He was a mystic. He saw this, experienced this expanded connection to all that is, and he came from that place. He modeled it, and he changed the world as a result. Everything he did politically, with civil disobedience, with his environmental aspects, and his spiritual aspects, they've come forth into today. We just had an Iranian speak here, and he's speaking at the Thoreau Institute, how he's taking Thoreau and translating it into whatever language it is they speak. Farsi. And he expects to change Iran from what it is now to what it can be. And that's our vision for humanity, that we are about to take an evolutionary leap into a higher way of being that Thoreau in fact foresaw. And you will see this as this talk unfolds. You'll see our thinking and Thoreau's thinking and the role of the indigenous peoples in that. Thoreau actually saw the role of the indigenous peoples in that, because they've kept their connection to this expanded universe through it all, through thick and thin. They as you may have heard them speak yesterday, they have a different way of being, a different way of seeing, that has kept them outside of the prevailing paradigm of the mainstream of life, and that's been very hurtful to them, to live in a world where people can't understand you, and think of Thoreau, think of the mystics of the world and of the people that aren't understood, and of that aspects of each of you. I don't think any of you would be in this room if you didn't have a resonance to that aspect of your being, and would love to be able to live from that place. Well, the good news is that is what's coming, that we can live from that place and change the world as a result. So we're if we get that far, we're going to give you some tools, and our book gives tools for that. So we'll keep moving on here, and let's see. So this is the Thoreau's instructions. Okay, it's really simple how to get there. Okay, and what to do, and with our work, we're showing that it's a conscious, loving universe that's going to support you when you do what Thoreau says here, and that is. Does anybody want to read it? Can you read it from there? Would someone like to read it from the audience?
Sure.
Yeah, great.
All right. If one listens to the faintest but constant suggestions of his genius, which are certainly true, he sees not to what extremes, or even insanity, it may lead him. And yet that way, as he grows more resolute and faithful, his road lies. The faintest assured objection which one healthy man feels will at length prevail over the arguments and customs of mankind.
Wonderful, thank you. And here's a little more of it. You want to continue?
Sure. No man ever followed his genius till it misled him. Though the results were bodily weakness, yet perhaps no one can say that the consequences were to be regretted, for these were a life conformity to higher principles.
So there you have it. It's just that simple. Follow your bliss, right? Joseph Campbell, build it and they will come, Field of Dreams. Okay? You can do it. If you can dream it, you can do it. But what's in our way is our understanding of the nature of the universe. We think it's a place that's going to get us. If we don't conform, it's going to come and get us. We're not going to survive. Our kids aren't going to survive. We're just not going to make it if we walk outside of the prevailing paradigm. Well, what we're bringing to the table through Thoreau, he has a kingpin quote to our whole thesis, and that is, when you walk in trust, magic happens. Things change. So we'll get there. So what we're saying is that there is humanity 2.0 that's coming on forth, and we've just gone from the woods to the cosmos. Okay, so we've made the leap, and so do you want to say a little something?
So what would a sort of a next phase human look like? How would a next phase human behave or believe, feel about the universe, understand about his or her place in the world and in society? Well, here's a little something I wrote to express that. The fully evolved human manifests the best features of all previous cultures. We are part of nature, not above it. Aware of the scientific perspective, yet not ruled by it. Tuned into a higher reality, yet fully present in society. A synthesis occurs, which brings forth something that has never been on the planet before. It's literally an evolutionary leap for our species.
So what we're bringing into it is this quantum mechanics aspect, and Andrew's going to speak on that.
So this is quite challenging. If you approach probably over 90% of today's scientists, today's physicists, they would say that we are nuts, that we are simply reading stuff into the science that's not there. We're wannabes, it's woo-woo, it's wishful thinking. However, there is a very small cadre of cutting-edge quantum physicists who are seeing beyond the limitations of the current paradigm. Even Einstein could not go there. He simply could not go there. Einstein, genius and visionary that he was nevertheless a traditional physicist. He couldn't relate to a phenomenon, for example, that he called spooky action at a distance. How can one thing here influence another thing over there with no apparent connection? We now know that that is a fact of the way the universe is constructed. It's called entanglement. Now, all entanglement means is that we are all connected. And the indigenous peoples of the world have always known that. There's a well-known Lakota phrase, Mataquiasan, all my relations, I am related to everything. And I need a little water, thank you. Thanks. So this image up on the screen here is just something I found on Google Images that seems to express this idea that everything is interwoven, interconnected. There are connections between all of us. If any of us has a thought, that thought is not separate. It's part of all that is. It influences everything. It's very subtle. We don't see it. It's not like I think, oh, the stock market's going to do such and such, and the stock market does such and such. It's not like that. There are a lot of people who have those kinds of voodoo ideas. It's not like that. But the fact is we are an interconnected part of a, the universe is not necessarily a physical thing. It was Sir Arthur Eddington, the great British scientist, who said, the universe is much more like a thought than a thing. It's not, this is a thing, or seems to be a thing. The universe is an interconnected, if you will, it's all energy. It's all spirit, if you like.
Wallace Black Elk, one of the great Lakota elders, who was a very close friend of mine for 15 years or so, always said, yes, our thoughts go all the way around the world. Okay, he'd say that continually. He said things that I just filed in my mind and said, okay, if he says so, then it's so, but I don't get it. And then quantum science started coming onto the table. With What the Bleep Do We Know, it started becoming more popular and more accessible. And I got it. Somebody asked me, they said, have you read the Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot? 3 people asked me. The third person put it in my hand. And when I read that, I saw that quantum science was explaining what Wallace Black Elk was desperate to have us understand. And then What the Bleep came on, like 10 years later. So it's just been this unfolding discovery, and we feel that we're bringing something by our synthesis of these ideas. We're bringing something to the table that isn't there to date. So that's all very exciting. So here's Thoreau on the subject.
What would Thoreau have to say about this exactly?
So we've got a Thoreau and a Thoreau. Did you notice? So we've got both.
We are very thorough.
We are very thorough. Anybody want to read this one? Anyone with a good loud voice?
The future will no doubt be a more natural life than this. We shall be acquainted and shall use flowers and stars and sun and moon and occupy this nature which now stands over and around us. We shall reach up to the stars and pluck fruit from many parts of the universe. We shall purely use the earth and not abuse it. God is in the breeze and whispering leaves, and we shall then hear him, her, or.
Did everybody hear that? And can everybody read it, or shall we read it too?
Why don't you
read it again?
Not a bad idea to repeat.
Okay. The future will no doubt be a more natural life than this. We shall be acquainted and shall use flowers and stars and sun and moon and occupy this nature which now stands over and around us. We shall reach up to the stars and pluck fruit from many parts of the universe. We shall purely use the earth and not abuse it. God is in the breeze and whispering leaves, and we shall then hear him. So this is thanks to Tom Blanding, who got me this quote yesterday. So here's an image of the oneness of creation. I don't know if you can see the details of this image, but it's a really beautiful image.
It's one artist's vision of the oneness of creation, the entanglement of all things. And so the entanglement, I think most of us get this. There's this whole movement. I don't know if anybody's been tracking what's going on in the spiritual realm, in coming out of India, coming out of Hinduism, coming out of Buddhism, and coming out of the Western world as well. This whole idea of oneness. There's something in India now called the Oneness University. People are talking about unity. Of course, we have Unitarian churches and unity churches, the New Thought churches, all of which really are based on versions of what we're talking about. This is not new. This is, however, I would say it's emergent. It's coming. It's a big deal, and we're at the beginning of a major change in perspective on the nature of the universe, which will change the way we humans behave.
Yeah, from my point of view, we're going to get it very soon, that we are one. We're not just one species, that we're all one consciousness. And then war will be absurd. There'll be things that we're doing now from our logical minds because of our belief in scarcity and separation and we, they, and mine and thine and all that stuff, that's just going to go away one day. How about that? One day. No, but we're moving towards it. You can hear it now. I don't know how many of you are aware of this oneness, and it's cool he brought that up because it's now on everyone's lips, in the consciousness field at least. I don't know what worlds you guys come from as far as what your environment is, as far as what you're hearing, but from in the consciousness field, this oneness is on the lips, and it wasn't 5 years ago. So it's fascinating to watch it unfold. And there's an organization called the Humanities Team, humanitiesteam.org, that's their whole thing. They're international. They're based on Neil Donald Walsh's Conversations with God, but it goes way beyond that into oneness, so you could check them out. And so we'll see what Thoreau has to say on the matter. Anyone want to read this? Is this good to have people reading, or would you rather have us just do it? You want to do it?
I believe that there is a subtle magnetism in nature, which if we unconsciously yield to it, will direct us aright. Nature is mythical and mystical always, and works with the license and extravagance of genius.
So
thank you,
did everybody hear that? Okay. So
what he's saying there, that's really an expression of trust, isn't it? You know, our book's called The Trust Frequency, and he says there's a subtle magnetism in nature, which if we unconsciously yield to it, that doesn't mean unintentionally, it just means take it for granted, just trust. Trust that nature will guide you, and by nature with a capital N, I think he means the same thing as people mean by the word God, or what we mean by the conscious loving universe.
And our own genius, our own higher inner promptings. So, another aspect of quantum science.
So back to quantum science. The other well-known aspect of quantum physics that has now been proven is the observer effect. Basically, it's this. Everything in the universe can either be, shall we say, manifest or unmanifest. Everything in the unmanifest aspect of the universe, which is vastly larger than the manifest, is in a state of potential, quantum potential. It remains that way until an observer appears to take note of it, to measure it, or whatever form that observation takes, at which point the undifferentiated potential suddenly coalesces into a single way. So this iPhone here, according to that, is just a massive potential that is not in the physical solid world at all. And yet, the moment I notice my iPhone, oh, look, it's here, it's solid. I can call Julia.
Okay, let's see what Thoreau says on the subject. We've got to keep moving or we won't get through all this. All right, how do we move? So here, what does Thoreau say about the observer effect, where to put our attention? Anybody want to read it?
We must learn to reawaken and keep ourselves awake, not by mechanical aids, but by an infinite expectation of the dawn, which does not forsake us even in our soundest sleep. I know of no more encouraging fact than the unquestionable ability of man to elevate his life by a conscious endeavor.
Do you want to talk about that?
Well, let's get
It is something to be able to paint a particular picture, or to carve a statue, and so to make a few objects beautiful. But it is far more glorious to carve and paint the very atmosphere and medium through which we look, which, morally, we can do. To affect the quality of the day, that is the highest of arts.
Okay, so this has to do with where we put our attention. Okay, what are we expecting? Are we expecting humanity to go down the tubes? Are we expecting humanity to rise to a higher level? Our expectations, where we put our attention, is key. And we'll point this out as we move along. And so, just quickly go through this.
So I think Thoreau, as a consummate scientist, he said, I am a natural philosopher to boot. By that, I think he meant I am a scientist. And that was in the context of the National Science Association wanting him somehow to define what it was that he does. And he said, if I told them, they would think I was crazy.
We'll get to that in a minute. We get to that clip. So anyway, no, but you do the macrocosm and the microcosm.
I am.
Yeah, okay, cool.
In other words, I think Thoreau would have been just wonderfully astonished to see what we are doing through science today. We are out in space exploring through such instruments as the Hubble Space Telescope the macrocosm. We're out there discovering that there are billions of hitherto unsuspected galaxies. How astonishing is that? The further we explore, the more we discover. There appears to be no end to it. What would Thoreau have written about that? What poetic description would he have come up had he been able to stroll through the universe in the way that we are now able to stroll through the universe, metaphorically? And here's the other direction we're going. Over in Switzerland, at the CERN Large Hadron Collider, we're exploring ever deeper into the tiniest microcosmic aspects of the universe, discovering such things as the Higgs boson, that great mystical discovery of, I think it was 2014, was it February 2014, where this phenomenon that's sort of as a particle, it's not really a particle, but a Peter Higgs back in the 1960s proposed that this Higgs boson might exist. He discovered that theoretically through mathematics, and this instrument that cost billions of dollars was able to actually detect that and prove that. What it all means, I don't know, but I think Thoreau would have loved the fact that we are now able to explore in ways that didn't involve putting on your boots and hiking up a mountain, much as he loved that. And personally, I think that the most extraordinary discovery that is emerging in science and has always been known by the Vedic rishis of the Himalayas for the last 5,000 or 6,000 years, and by all of the indigenous peoples of whom I'm aware, the Kalahari Bushmen, the Australian Aborigines, the Native Americans, the fact that the universe is conscious, the fact that the universe is alive, because how on earth could it be conscious without being alive? How could it be alive without being conscious? Those two things seem to be interconnected. And I recognize that this is a very perhaps controversial statement, but has anybody ever read a book with that title, The Conscious Universe? Anybody? Well, 5,000 people and nobody's read a book of that title. This is amazing.
Young Alison Marlow.
Young Alison, you have? So let me tell you this. There are 5 books, no less than 5 books. Google it and you'll see I'm not kidding you. There are 5 books with that title.
The Conscious Universe.
The Conscious Universe. 2 of those writers are quantum scientists, quantum physicists. Okay? They are cutting-edge, out-of-the-box thinkers who are seeing that the universe is conscious. So we happened to be at a conference with those 2 men, and I cornered each of them individually and asked them the same question. I said, okay, you have a book called The Conscious Universe. Does that mean it's alive? And they both looked at me with this same kind of look on their face and said, of course. Oh, I was like,
let's
okay.
see what Thoreau has to say on this subject.
And then Deepak Chopra, you may have heard of him. He's a famous East Indian gentleman, wrote a book of that title. There's a new one by an English scientist, and there's yet another. There are 5 books with that title. So it's beginning to emerge that the universe is conscious. What does that mean? That's an extraordinary discovery. And if the universe is alive, do you know what that means? It means the universe is a biological entity. It's a being. This is big.
So let's see what Thoreau has to say on the subject. Anybody want to read this?
You see what he says. The earth is alive. Wait a minute. I thought I made that up.
Anybody? Well, I'll read it. The earth is not a mere fragment of dead history, stratum upon stratum, like the leaves of a book, to be studied by geologists and antiquaries chiefly, but living poetry, like the leaves of a tree, which precede flowers and fruit, not a fossil earth, but a living earth.
So that sounds a lot like the Gaia hypothesis, doesn't it? The idea that our planet is a living planet. Our planet is a conscious entity where we are all connected, in the words of Ktaadn and his idea of the noosphere, the sphere of consciousness that encapsulates, envelops our planet, is a single sphere of consciousness of which each of us is an individual local focal point.
So now we'll go to Brad Dean showing us Thoreau's connection to science and higher law and the native people.
Thoreau's attitude about science, what we now call science, and in fact Thoreau himself called science, and Thoreau had a different attitude about something he called natural history, or on occasion he called it natural philosophy. And Thoreau's attitude about science, well, he generally was antithetical to science, generally. I think this example will give you some idea of what I'm talking about. In 1853, March of 1853, he received a letter from Spencer Baird. Thoreau wrote in his journal that evening when he had obviously been thinking about this, getting this letter. And here's what he writes in his journal. Baird was the secretary of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. The secretary of the Association for the Advancement of Science requested me by a printed circular letter from Washington the other day to fill the blanks against certain questions, among which the most important one was what branch of science I was specially interested in, using the term science in the most comprehensive sense possible. Now, though I could state to a select few that Department of Human Inquiry which engages me, and should be rejoice and should rejoice at an opportunity so to do, I felt that it would be to make myself the laughing stock of the scientific community to describe or attempt to describe to them that branch of science which specifically interests me, inasmuch as they do not believe in a science which deals with the higher law. Higher law would have a particular historic context in this sense. It was often used in the slavery debate, for instance, with Seward talking about the higher law, the laws of conscience, as opposed to the constitutional law. So that's, in a sense, that's the kind of a context for what Thoreau means about a higher law. So I was obliged to speak to their condition and describe to them that poor part of me which alone they can understand. The fact is, I am a mystic, a transcendentalist, and a natural philosopher to boot. Now, I think of it, I should have told them at once that I was a transcendentalist. That would have been the shortest way of telling them that they would not understand my explanation.
That's it.
Next clip. Yeah.
Okay. So.
Do you want to play this clip?
Yeah.
Thoreau's attitude about science, what we now call science, and in fact Thoreau himself called science.
That's it. Okay. So, that clip was actually supposed to say that what his area of scientific exploration is the ways of the Wabanaki people before contact. So that would have led into this. I don't know why it didn't get into the clip. But in that letter, he said, I'll answer your question, and that is the ways of the Wabanaki people before contact. So that's his particular interest, scientific interest. So then we move on to Thoreau and the Indigenous worldview. And so we go to the next clip.
Thoreau, after seeing phosphorescent wood in the night. A scientific explanation, as it is called, would have been altogether out of place there. That is for pale daylight. Science with its retorts would have put me to sleep. It was the opportunity to be ignorant that I improved. It suggested to me that there was something to be seen if one had eyes. It made a believer of me more than before. I was prepared after this to hear of the most startling and unimagined phenomenon witnessed by his folks. They are abroad at all hours and seasons and scenes so unfrequented by white men. Nature must have made 1,000 revelations to them, which are still secrets to us. The same experience always gives birth to the same sort of belief or religion. One revelation has been made to the Indian, another to the white man. I have much to learn of the Indian, nothing of the missionary. I am not sure, but all that would tempt me to teach the Indian my religion would be his promise to teach me his. Where has all your knowledge gone to? It evaporates completely, for it has no depth. The Allagash and East Branch, the Maine woods.
When the people could do magic, they could transform themselves into different creatures they call shapeshifters. They could make things happen. They could make things out of nothing. They could change themselves. They could make themselves disappear. They could create things as the Creator does. And they could speak to the animals and speak to the trees and speak to the plants and actually ask plants what medicine would they be good for? What could they heal the human race? The Creator has put this spirit in all of us. It seems to be more pronounced and prevalent in the Indian ways, but everybody has it, no matter what color, shape, form you may be. You have that, and that's how this body holds it.
So here's Thoreau himself. Why then make so great ado about the Roman and the Greek and neglect the Indian? This arrow-headed character has not been deciphered. When he held up an arrowhead, he said this arrow-headed character has not been deciphered. New earths, new themes expect us. Those are just a couple of quotes pulled out from something that we're going to have a clip about.
From a very early age, he was collecting arrowheads and spear points. He seemed to have a knack for finding those sort of artifacts all over Concord. In fact, he said the soil of Concord is arrowhead-diferous because it was so easy for him to find arrowheads. Natives lived in this area for almost 10,000 years.
As much as sportsmen go in pursuit of ducks, and gunners of musquash, and scholars of rare books, and travelers of adventures, and poets of ideas, and all men of money, I go in search of arrowheads when the proper season comes round again. Journal, March 28th, 1859.
So it was very easy for him to find those sort of artifacts in the soil of Concord because they were all farmers here when Thoreau was here. So they're always turning up the dirt and always turning up arrowheads and old sites of campfires and lodges and stuff like that.
The larger pestles and axes may, perchance, grow scarce and be broken, but the arrowhead shall perhaps never cease to wing its way through the ages to eternity. It was originally winged for but a short flight, but it still, to my mind's eye, wings its way through the ages, bearing a message from the hand that shot it. They are not fossil bones, but as it were fossil thoughts, forever reminding me of the mind that shaped them. I would fain know that I am treading in the tracks of human game, that I am on the trail of mind, and these little reminders never fail to set me right. Journal, March 28th, 1859.
These were our predecessors. Why then make so great ado about the Roman and the Greek and neglect the Indian? We need not wander off with boys in our imaginations to Juan Fernandez, to wonder at footprints in the sand there. Here is a print, still more significant at our doors, the print of a race that has preceded us, and this, the little symbol that nature has transmitted to us. Yes, this arrow-headed character is probably more ancient than any other, and to my mind it has not been deciphered. Well, ever since I was a child here in Concord, I have studied the Indians of New England. Of course, I went to Harvard College, and we studied Greek and Roman philosophy and Greek and Roman literature. I think, however, that while those things are important and certainly have had a big influence on my life, it is just as important to study the Indians. They are divine as well. And we can learn a great deal from the way that the Indian has lived here in our land, their respect for nature, their use of the land, their belief that we are all part of the Great Spirit.
So here is some aspects of the indigenous worldview. Does anybody want to read these out? Okay, we'll just run through these. Respect and reverence for all of life. Interrelatedness of all things and actions. Co-creative power of thought. The observer effect. Concern for future aspects of present action. Living in balance. Concern for the common good. Trust in a higher power. Incorporation of metaphysical into physical reality. Equality of all aspects of life. Sharing. Cooperation. So the question is, how do we get to that place where we bring these aspects to pass? These are all things that we dream about for ourselves and our children. How do we get there? How do we do this? And we're saying that we do it through shifting our assumptions about the nature of the universe. And the indigenous, we have a couple of little slides on the indigenous.
So here's how those people who carry the oldest DNA in any living community, two of them, one in Africa, one in Australia, here's how they might express it. The Bushmen of the Kalahari are the little people of Africa who used to roam all the way from Egypt to the southern tip in present-day Cape Town. They used to occupy the whole of Africa. Now there's a remnant in the jungles of the Central Africa, who we know of as the Pygmies. And to the south, in 5 South African countries, are the so-called Bushmen of the Kalahari. And their instruction is this: open your heart to others. When you do so, you will feel our spirit. It will make you dance, and it will make you happy. And then you too will be a Bushman. Now that doesn't sound so hard, does it? You know, we Westerners, we think we have to wade through mystical books and sit through endless presentations and get PhDs. They say, dance. It'll make you happy. And then you too, you'll be here. You'll be one of us.
Andrew's known the Bushmen for many years, and our film, In Search of the Future, that's included with our book, opens in the Kalahari with the Kalahari Bushmen.
Who are possibly the most loving people we have ever encountered. And is that what's important, or is there something else that's important? And the second oldest people on the planet, as far as we can tell, are the Australian Aborigines, who feel that we are actually travelers through time and space. And they say, we are all visitors to this time, this place. We are just passing through. Our purpose here is to observe, to learn, to grow, to love, and then we return home. So they just see it from a totally spiritual, we manifest into these bodies, and then we return whence we came.
So what we're bringing to the table is that it's not only a conscious universe, it's a conscious, loving universe, that there's only love. And we're saying that we can achieve this highest dream of Thoreau of ourselves if once we understand the conscious, loving nature of the universe, and we walk in trust of that, once we understand how loved we are by a conscious, loving universe. And what we're saying is that the reason we see things as not love is because we don't understand the nature of that love, which is unconditional, that it loves us so much it gives us everything we ask for. And we'll give some clues as to what our requests to that conscious, loving universe are. But we wanted to show how Thoreau and the Native Americans see this love. So this is just another image of this conscious, loving universe. So here's what Thoreau has to say. The light of the sun is but the shadow of love. Love is the wind, the tide, the waves, the sunshine. Its power is incalculable. It is many horsepower. It never ceases, it never slacks. It can move the globe without a resting place. It can warm without fire. It can feed without meat. It can clothe without garments. It can shelter without roof. It can make a paradise within which will dispense with a paradise without. But though the wisest men in all ages have labored to publish this force, and every human heart is, sooner or later, more or less made to feel it, yet how little is actually applied to social ends. Still less are we accumulating its power and preparing to act with greater energy at a future time. Shall we not contribute our shares to this enterprise then? And here's Arnie Neptune, who speaks briefly on the subject.
We are taught as Indian people, we're not only taught to respect and honor all life, but with that comes the word love. Love is what projects and makes all things happen. Love itself. We have to learn to love ourselves first, and then we learn to love all of other lives as well, and all people, no matter what race or what nationality, what color, whoever they are, all over the earth. Love is what will make it for a peaceful time.
So, we're wrapping up.
So, just to summarize then, I think Thoreau would agree, being a scientist, and as science has realized this very simple but very profound statement: everything is vibration. This is an electromagnetic universe within which we are electromagnetic beings, and it's all conscious.
It's all love.
And we create reality through the power of our consciousness. This is one of the powers of the human being that we're just beginning to suspect. If any of you saw a recent very successful film and book called The Secret, that showed just a little bit of this. The fact is that through the observer effect, through the power of creation with our consciousness, we are not separate from the universe. So it sounds maybe absurd for a little human being here in Concord, Massachusetts, to be creating the universe, but the fact is, that's the fact.
And we have what we call the 7 A's of consciousness, which are our requests to this conscious, loving universe. We've put it into these 7 A's so people can get up in the morning and check their 7 A's and see what vibratory, what frequency one is in, and what one's requests to this universe, what our requests are. So here's a little sentence with the 7 A's. With expanded awareness and accurate assumptions, we choose our attitude, consciously direct our attention, align with our highest intuition, take committed action, and allow the loving universe to manifest beyond our wildest dreams. And here's how Thoreau says it, okay? This is the quote, the kingpin quote to this whole concept that we have on the trust frequency, that the laws in the different frequencies are actually different, that we can shift our frequency and have different laws apply to us, regardless of what our twin sister's doing, regardless of what anybody else is doing. We can shift our own frequency and thereby help shift the collective frequency. So here's Thoreau. And this is the conclusion to Walden, in the conclusion to Walden. I learned this, at least, by my experiment, that if one advances confidently in the direction of his dreams and endeavors to live the life which he has imagined, he will meet with a success unexpected in common hours. He will put some things behind, will pass an invisible boundary, New, universal, and more liberal laws will begin to establish themselves around and within him, or the old laws will be expanded and interpreted in his favor in a more liberal sense, and he will live with the license of a higher order of beings. Okay, this is really cool. And when I quote this all the time. Because Henry David Thoreau said it, people are like, whoa, maybe I can take that on as true and put my life on it. Okay, that's the key to this whole thing, the action part, the putting one's life on it. And here's another quote that's been attributed to Goethe. He didn't actually write it. A Swiss mountaineer wrote
Scottish.
it. A Scottish.
Begins with S.
Scottish mountaineer actually wrote it, but because Goethe's name's on it, people really can't take it to heart too. Until one is committed, there is hesitancy, the chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness. Concerning all acts of initiative and creation, there is one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless plans, countless ideas, and splendid plans. The moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. All sorts of things occur to help one that never would have otherwise occurred. A whole stream of events issues from the decision, raising in one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidences and meetings and material assistance, which no man could have dreamed would have come his way. Okay? What we're saying is when we walk in trust, it's not providence who moves. It's us who've moved ourselves into a higher frequency where the laws are different. These chance meetings, material assistance, which no man could have dreamt would have come his way. They're sitting there waiting for us. We're just not there. There's a party going on. We're all invited. We're just not there because we've incarnated into this lower frequency. We've played the game. We see the rules of this frequency, the systems that are here, and we knew from birth we better play by those rules or we'd be out. Okay. Well, what is now the new scientific paradigm is discovering that there's a whole new way there's a whole new set of rules. And we can play by those rules if we know the rules. And so we're just giving you some insights into what we see are tools for getting into that new ball game and playing by those new rules that Thoreau foresaw and that the native indigenous peoples of the world have been living by forever. Well, actually, what I say is that nobody's actually lived this in its pure form yet. Okay, because my understanding is that the earth has been in a field of fear, and it has influenced everyone, including the indigenous peoples, the Christian faith is based on a total trust-based paradigm. If you listen to Jesus on the Sermon on the Mount, man, you get it all. Okay, look at the lilies in the field; they toil not. Why worry? Don't worry about what you're going to eat and what you're going to wear. Don't you think the Lord's going to clothe you and feed you? This is trust, man. And so it's all there in the core of our religions. We just haven't lived it because of this energy of fear. Well, in our estimation, the earth is moving into a higher frequency. So the Murphy's Law, where the toast ended up butter side down, whatever was wrong could happen will happen. Well, now it's landing butter side up. Okay? We're getting to feel that way, and we can now trust it and move and see that synchronicities are happening, that amazing things are happening. Well, just trust that and keep your attention on that because it's what's up. This man from Iran, saying he's going to take Thoreau back and change his people. It's happening worldwide. It's a species thing. We're going to get it, that we're all one, and we're going to walk into this higher frequency. So, what else do we have to say?
So here's a question that I think Thoreau would have asked. Are we standing at the edge of the shore of a new scientific paradigm. Here's a quote from Dean Radin, who is one of the gentlemen who wrote a book called The Conscious Universe. One of his early books was called The Conscious Universe. And this is very recent, this one, and it's more about, he studies the paranormal. He does scientific experiments around so-called PSI phenomena. Very interesting man, very serious scientist. And he says this: "It is known as a certainty that there exists an unimaginably powerful creator and sustainer of reality, and of you in particular. This creator is unborn, uncreated, undying, and unchanging." And that's a quote from a very serious scientist named Dean Radin, PhD, in his new book called Supernormal: Science, Yoga, and the Evidence for Extraordinary Psychic Abilities.
And he's with the Institute of Noetic Sciences, noetic.org. And we're going to their conference in a week where we're presenting.
So this is all we really have to do. Release the love, let it out, let go of the fear, open our hearts, and just drop all that stuff from the past that caused that kind of, those behaviors that we're not exactly proud of as humans. And this is what Thoreau said.
And also just individually to know that we are so loved that everything that has happened in our lives has happened for us, not to us, on our soul's journey to wholeness. So here's what Thoreau has to say on the subject.
He says, "To be a philosopher is not merely to have subtle thoughts, or even to found a school, but so to love wisdom as to live according to its dictates, a life of simplicity, independence, magnanimity, and trust. It is to solve some of the problems of life, not only theoretically, but practically."
So, this is in closing. In the trust frequency, trust replaces fear, ease replaces struggle, generosity replaces hoarding, abundance replaces scarcity, unity replaces separation, new systems develop, new relationships replace outmoded ways of being, and an understanding of the interconnectedness and sacredness of all things emerges. It is in this way that true peace and profound freedom will come to prevail on earth. So, everything is vibration, frequency. We can choose our frequency and our reality. The laws are different in the different frequencies. And the 7 A's of consciousness, our requests to the universe, determine our frequency. So, trust the loving universe. We are one. Thank you for coming. So we have a couple minutes for questions, comments, contradictions, challenges.
Anybody think we're totally crazy?
That's the best part.
That's the best part.
Thank you for that. Yes.
I want to say that I've always known, and I think we all probably have intrinsically since we were very small, that love is the most powerful thing in the universe. And I'm really resonating with this dissolving of the fear frequency. And the other thing I want to add is I have a friend who has a screensaver on her computer that shows the galaxies in the universe. And whenever I look at it, sometimes it was a little bigger, but sometimes just like this infinite peace. Like, oh yeah, that's that. And I often can feel that in nature too.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. That is nature. The galaxies are nature as well. Yeah. Anyone else? Juliet.
Well, I just think it's very profound how infinite the microcosm is, as well as how infinite the macrocosm is, and how they parallel each other.
Isn't it amazing? The deeper we go in either direction, the closer they seem to look like each other.
The mysterious forces,
Yep.
magnetism,
Yep.
that particles are discovered
Thank you. Yes.
Yes. There's also been some tradition in the Western world, for example, that very similar to everything's been presented. In the Middle Ages, there was a mystic called Meister Eckhart,
Right.
who sang a lot of the same things. He felt it and preached it. The Catholic Church tried to kick him out.
That's
for
right.
that, but, so there have been roots in the Western tradition too, but not very much appreciated.
Right. You know, we're really talking about the wisdom of our human species, and it's not East or West or Indigenous or non-Indigenous. Those are artificial divisions, quite honestly, throughout our entire history, however long that has been, and I think it's several 100,000 years. We've been seekers. We've been sitting around the campfire 100,000 years ago somewhere in Africa, gazing at the stars and trying to figure it out and sharing our inspirations, sharing our poetry and our songs and our visions. And then it sort of crystallized into the religions and the cultures and the nations and the South and the North, and you know, and I'm looking to where we move beyond that back into the unity we were speaking of.
And it's a universal desire of the human spirit to be free, true freedom. You know, America was founded on certain principles that the founders thought that we could, in fact, do this in society. But we feel that we can't do what the founders of this country envisioned until we shift our assumptions about the nature of the universe. We just can't get there. It's not possible in this frequency. We have to go to this higher place to actualize this dream, this vision that all people dream of for their children, for themselves and their children. So we feel we will get there. Now with the World Wide Web, it's connecting the whole of the human race, and that's the first time that has ever happened. So we can all come together and bring our pieces of the puzzle together and bring a puzzle, a picture of a world that nobody's ever seen before. That's what's up as far as we're concerned. And Thoreau had that vision, that there was something beyond what he could see. And Juliet, you know, the whole concept of the holographic universe is that in every drop of water is the whole universe. So I don't grok that personally, but it's known that in the holographic understanding of the universe that everything is everywhere in the smallest aspect of it.
Which is why each of us is the universe. It's a complete illusion that we are not the universe. That takes some getting used to, but it does change our perspective.
And as these things are revealed to us, you know, we're sitting here talking about this now. We wouldn't have been sitting here talking about it 5 years ago. You know, we are evolving. The consciousness is evolving. What we're opening our awareness to is shifting. The future is not a direct extrapolation from the present. From our point of view, there is a leap, and in our point of view, there is a leap that brought Homo sapiens sapien to the table. Okay, we're not a direct descendant of the ape thing, as far as we're concerned. There's a huge million-year gap in the whole Darwinian theory of evolution. What happened that brought us here to do this for the whole universe? As far as we're concerned, as far as I'm concerned, it's the opening of the human heart. The whole of creation is awaiting the opening of the human heart, that when we